So I think this is part of why attachment types have such a hard time with Hexad types, because to us, it does feel like to move forward in life, you have to settle. Like you're never truly going to get
Right.
what you want. And like that's just
Right.
obvious. So to watch Hexad types like actively go after what they want and do things that like aren't really socially acceptable to get to that thing that they want is like, how dare you? You're doing something that I'm not allowed to do.
The big hormone enneagram.
Let me lay it on the line. I got a little freakiness inside. Let you know that the man has got to deal with it.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres 4 with 5 wing, 458 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9 with 1, 974 trifix.
What up? It's Emeka. I'm an 8-wing-7, sexual self-pres with 854 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres-social 3, wing 4, with a 369 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Oh, my
No.
head's just been exploding since the last one. I've been thinking thinking about attachment versus Hexad. So we got a lot of stuff that I think is really interesting. Might take a couple calls because we're going to need your input just to sort of echo if we're on the right track or not.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
She says sheepishly.
Yeah.
She's thinking about her other plans.
No.
No, it's representing the whole world is all on your shoulders.
It
That's the
is.
attachment.
She's
There's a
experiencing
lot going on.
she's experiencing the tension of being pulled in all directions.
Yeah, I have to get this stupid accounting homework done. It like literally, guys, it took me an hour and a half to do 3 fucking problems of accounting last night. And
That's
it's
crazy.
driving me up a wall. And I never, ever, ever want to look at another accounting sheet ever again, or I might burn the world down. So anyway, that's where I am right now.
Yeah, I talked to because my brain was burning. We were supposed to record yesterday, but we didn't. So I had some questions, and I called Joseph. A question about I just realized like celebrity culture, or even the idea of sort of identifying with the celebrity, and like following TV shows and people like commenting on Twitter in response to reality TV people and with death threats because of something they did in an episode. Like what
Well,
is that? I called Joseph and I said, hey, there's this concept of a thing called it's called the parasocial relationship, which is what people are doing with characters on TV or social media figures that they identify with them, and they have sort of relationships, and it's sort of happening with this podcast too. So I called him. I said, hey, is this a social thing, or do you think it's social versus social blind, or do you think it's a Hexad versus attachment? And we started like kind of trying to figure it out, and what we concluded was that this is an example of the core pattern of attachment.
yeah.
And I was like
Yeah.
mind fucking blown, because there's so many long tail examples. Because if we look at celebrity culture as a very strange thing, even though it's
Yeah.
not a strange thing, because that's what normal, most normal people think is normal. Like we have paparazzi emails, endless paparazzi emails, and celebrity culture. Like we're just hooked into these figures. You don't even know them. It's just like the hologram character of what they represent. But people are very hooked into that. And I'm like, you can look at our group and what happens when people show up, and it's like, you don't know us, you're just strangers on the internet. But people have these really passionate reactions to questions that they ask strangers having to do with themselves. And I've been trying to understand that for the last 3 years, because every time it happens, it still doesn't make sense to me. And this celebrity culture connection, that, oh shit, attachment types are inevitably over familiarity with people,
Yeah.
everyone. So this idea that I think you said it in the chat that that you had an issue with your boyfriend where he assumes to know what you're thinking, and you assume that he knows what you're thinking. So this fake intuition. So it's like attachment types are doing that. for
Yeah.
everyone?
Every day, all day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily everybody, but I think that they're looking for cues constantly about who they like, like identification keys that they can feel comfortable, like that they can identify with or not. And I think that's
Yes.
why, especially um, with attachment types, you really do see pretty extreme reactions one way or another to things that, like, at least for myself, I'm like, what? I don't understand what the thing is, what the hook is, you know?
Yes. It's just been an eye-opening conversation to have because, last episode we did, Nancy talked about how attachment types think Hexad types are cool, or they're triggered by them, and a couple Hexad types in the group, including social types, commented on how they've experienced this lifelong issue of unknowingly upsetting people. And when I mean people, attachment types, and this is based on the assumption that the vast majority of the population is comprised of attachment types. I think it's probably somewhere around 70, at least 70%. But up to you to how to think to figure out what you think that is. But it's the vast majority of people. What we consider the world and culture, how it works, is based on the assumptions of attachment types. So if you're a Hexad type, you probably can relate to the notion that you just unknowingly upset people. And so that is begging the question, why? What is so different about Hexad types that attachment types would feel upset? And
Mhm.
so that opened up a whole can of worms.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is super interesting and I feel like it's super important. Yet I find, I like, on one hand, I get it in a certain cognitive way, but I don't have like a body sense of seeing, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's hard for me to grasp.
yeah,
So my the way I'm understanding this is that hexad types, because rejection and frustration are different ways of I can't hook.
hmm,
I mean, frustration is still being hooked. There is an attachment there, but it's
right,
a negative attachment. It's a pushing
hmm,
away from. And rejection is like I don't know where to connect or hook on anything.
yes,
So hexad types, they're referencing their own direct experience without a lot of extra input. Whereas it seems like attachment types have their own direct experience, but then they introject familial conditioning more
yes,
readily than hexad types. And that the way Alexander puts it is that she has her yes or no, but then there is the familial yes and no, or it can be cultural or whatever, that is laid on top of that yes and no that comes from my sense of self. And so that overlay, so to speak, can create a lot of confusion and conflict for the attachment type because it's sort of like the conflict there can be two separate voices within them and conflicts with those voices and ways in which the familial voice is habitually overemphasized because that's you're adapting yourself
hmm,
overemphasized. And then so yeah, this point about overfamiliarity is like that everybody is adapting. It's just
hmm,
everybody's adapting, and that is a project, so to speak, that everybody is wanting to do,
yes.
and that there is value, I guess, connection, attachment, that is brought about through trying to find this like common ground or this baseline same page thing.
Part of what the issue that comes from that is when hexad types don't try to connect or try to kind of shift to meet the person in the middle, it feels like a attack because it's
Yes.
like I'm trying so hard to do this for you and you're not giving me anything in return. How fucking dare you?
So that notion of attack is very interesting because that's basically the reaction that we get. But the reason for it, I just realized, is that what attachment types are assuming about everyone. I mean, we're all projecting our own type perspectives on everyone, but because the vast majority of the world is attachment, this just gets reinforced over and over and over again. So what they're projecting on everyone is that everyone is attachable. And I was like, okay, I don't know who said that in the chat or well, but I've been thinking about that. What does it mean to be attachable? And what sets attachment types off about hexad types is like attachment types just have their location immediately. There's no wiggle room, and that feels violent because what attachment types are assuming is that we're all attachable, which means that our location is not necessarily clear, and there's going to be a negotiation between you and I, because we already have a relationship, and it's assumed that we are going to have to negotiate how you're influencing me and I'm influencing you, or I'm going to have to mirror you in some way, even if it's like a little bit. And so, which means my location and your location is a little bit unclear, which explains why, attachment types feeling triggered by Hexad types and this likability magic that attachment types have, especially Bermuda types. Why is it that some of the most popular people are, sixes, nines, and threes? Like when you have a star that people just project onto, the reason they can project on whatever people can project on attachment types, or attachment types projecting what they want to see on other attachment types, because attachment types are negotiating where what their location is based on the relationship they're assuming they have with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the podcast.
Well, David,
We're
you
done.
said some shit that like kind of summed it up pretty well, that about the agreement piece. Could you say that again?
Asking David to repeat himself.
Yeah.
It's his favorite thing to do.
Do I remember anything? Let's see. Well, there was the comment about soup.
No, it's before that.
There's a comment about soup. Just out of context. That's really fucking funny.
Yeah. I thought I'd bring in some food,
I would love some good soup right now.
Yeah, this one, I think. There's an unconscious assumption that everyone is trying to come to at least a feeling of agreeing with whomever is around, whether that's in the same online group or at work or wherever.
Yes. And so, like, trying to understand, why are people upset when we tell them, you come to the group, if you want to get typed, you ask us to type you. We don't type you without your requesting to. And, disclaimer, you might get a different typing. Regardless of what is said, people get really, really reactive about the typings that they get. And this attachment piece is finally helping me understand why that is. And I think, David, you said something about, people hooking into, or attachment types over identifying with the group, or the podcast, or whatever else, are expecting some kind of an agreement that we're going to mirror what they're seeing or feeling about themselves, like this fake intuition that Nancy, you talked about, like that attachment types are doing, that they're assuming that we're at least going to acknowledge what they're thinking and feeling. So, like, how does that? I guess I want to understand that. How does that work for you, Nancy?
Doesn't work very well. I'm not really sure where to enter into that question.
Well, I guess,
So,
why do you
let me-
think we're assholes? I guess, why do you think Hexad types are assholes? Because they're not, like, what does that feel like?
Nancy,
Um,
why do you hate me?
Well, you specifically, John. It's the Egypt thing, all right? It's the Egypt. So if I were talking, like, it was a much more visceral reaction, like before I realized I was an attachment type and what that was and how that impacted me. So I'm going to be using kind of the stance of before I knew what was going on, because it just feels like someone is purposefully standing in front of you going, I could make an effort to agree with you or meet you in the middle or morph to kind of, fit in here, but I'm actively choosing not to. Because the only time I rub someone the wrong way, or, 99% of the times that I rub someone the wrong way, it's on purpose. So if you're rubbing me the wrong way, it's on purpose. I'm assuming that it's on purpose.
That's
Now
interesting.
I'm understanding that's not the
Right.
case, and I get to enjoy, like, their point of view a lot more, and I oftentimes find it a lot more funny now. But in the past, it just felt like someone was actively being like, no, I'm going to be a dick just because I want to cause issues.
Wow.
Right. Which again is the thing of the underlying assumption of attachment is that everybody's
Everybody's
intention
in
is
this
to
game.
everybody's intention is to come to agreement.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And then if I'm having, I still do this too. If I'm having a conversation with someone and they are actively disagreeing with me, they're saying like, no, I'm viewing it this way. I have to fight myself to not be like, oh, well, I do too now. Now that you
Oh,
said that, I do too. Because if they're not adjusting, then I have to adjust. Then it's on me to adjust.
oh wow.
So I still do that, which is very annoying.
All right. So my first question, which I'm just saying out loud to say my train of thought, but it's like my first thing goes to, all right, well, what's the payoff of that? And then I get that attachment is on some level, but I'm like, does attachment ever actually work? Does it ever actually get you what you want? Is there ever actually a real attachment?
So typically, in my experience, you have to get through like first impressions. First impressions are super important to me. And I feel, like this may just be my type, but I feel like they're super important to everyone. So if you get past that first impression and we have some form of an attachment that is a little less forced, then that's where I could be like, okay, I'm going to stop adjusting now and see how this goes.
Okay. So what you're saying is that it's like giving somebody the benefit of the doubt when you first meet them. And then after that, you're sort of figuring out who they are.
No, well, no, I think what she's saying is that when she meets somebody that she's going to maybe go along with what their preferences are and then slowly shift to revealing her location
Hmm.
to be more individuated. And that's just something that I've experienced with attachment types, where it's like, I want the bond, I want the bond, I want the connection. So I'm not going to like Hexad.
Like wanting the bond
The bond is actually there.
before it's there, because like for me, I'm like, I don't give a fuck about you, and then I'm like, oh, this person's actually cool.
Right. Because
Well,
you and I are going to relate based on our individual positions. It's like if we overlap, then we're friends.
Yeah.
But attachment types were like, I need to overlap first.
yeah. And
Mm.
also there's an assumption that like that person is not going to open up and show me where they are if I don't make it a comfortable space for them.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's
This is,
fucking interesting.
yeah, exactly. This is
There,
the part that's been like really triggering me because it's like, what is this
that,
trigger in me? Because it's like, they're saying they're overdoing yes, but it's kind of an ambivalent yes for the sake of creating the connection that they assume that is supposed to be there.
that that gives what we just touched on gives me chills because I was like my like a body reaction, not like
Yes.
chills, or something, but I had body reaction. I was like, oh fuck, because and maybe it has to do with our four stuff. But it's like my strategy is to broadcast loudly what I am first,
Hmm.
and that's whether or not there's going to be like if you resonate with
Mhm.
this. Like
Yep.
I expect people to just be broadcasting who and what they are,
Nope.
and I'm like, why would they not? Like why? Like because yeah, like you get like rejection, but it's like I don't care about these people giving me, that reject me anyway. Like why would I want that? Like why would I want anybody's approval from
Mhm.
that point of view?
Joseph, I talked to Joseph about this. Joseph had something interesting to say that if you zoom out, that it makes sense. Because if all of humanity was individuating and basically being specific about their preferences, there wouldn't be any sort of collective anything.
No.
There wouldn't be any
Nothing would ever get done.
like there wouldn't be any reason like all these cultural movements and celebrity culture and how people identify with characters or how people just get involved and swept up in like ideologies and all these the only reason all this stuff works I used to think it was just a social instinct, but now I realize that the driver for all this togetherness and groupthink and all these things is attachment, is the
Yeah.
assumption that we're all swimming in the same soup. And it's funny to me sometimes to see the accusations that come from people who are reacting to sort of like a hexad point of view that we might have, which isn't adapting at all. So people start coming up with stuff like there's this large group think conspiracy that's going on, which is even more attachment. So it's like
Mhm.
um yeah, it's been blowing me away in that I did not understand that people, meaning attachment types, were expecting or needing this from me. I didn't know that this is what people expected connection to mean.
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't. I get it conceptually. I like if you're not if you're not putting your preferences and like what you are out there immediately, then what's anybody connecting to? Is like that's like my, you know what I mean? Like what do you're not connecting to some. There's nothing to connect to unless you're.
You're connecting to the sense of connection that everybody connects to.
Yeah.
All right.
Here's
not
another
have that.
example. Here's another example because I've been experiencing this in multiple ways. Like the celebrity parasocial example is one, and another one was, for example, the assumption that, like, let's say, for example, John, you introduced me to you want me to meet some of your friends, and knowing you, I assume that you're going to think that, hey, if let's see how Emeka gets along with these people, he might like them, he might not. What I learned at the attachment point of view is if I like somebody and you like me,
Then you'll
then
like this person.
you'll like my friends too, and they'll like you too because that's how it works. And I
Yeah.
was like, what?
Yeah. Well.
And it really sucks when that gets like proven wrong.
Yes. I guess what's going on, I guess the assumption with attachment types is that if I attach to you, if I adapt to you, if I go along and adjust to you, you're going to do the same for me too.
Hmm.
And that's why, attachment types who have these sort of parasocial relationships with us, um, are saying, "Oh, I listen to the podcast and I, you know, active member of the group."
Agree
but
with your view about this.
yeah, why don't you acknowledge our, they're expecting a reciprocal relationship in that sort of way that we're gonna acknowledge what their thoughts and attitudes and ideas are too. And I'm just floored. I'm
Well,
floored.
what I said before too is that we will get criticisms from various people that we're not incorporating other people's feedback. But it's like if we incorporated like two people's feedback, that would be, according to other critics, the wrong feedback to have accepted
Yes.
because it is in disguise a way of saying acknowledge my individual
Yes.
feedback and not theirs. And it's like not everybody's feedback is going to be the fucking same. And
Yeah.
so, like I've done that before where I've seen like, okay, this person has a point, so I'm bringing this in, and then people like, that were like, oh, you're not taking in feedback, and then it's like, oh, but you're not taking in the right feedback. And it's
Yes.
like, it's never going to be right. So what? Like I'm just going to do my thing.
Exactly.
Welcome back to Big Hormone Enneagram. Last week, David, Nancy, and Emeka were exploring attachment after these the cascading effects of our discussions on intimacy and personality and all this other shit. And so we're continuing that conversation. We're talking about attachment types, and looking at how, by our estimation, most people are attachment types. And so to even understand the whole Enneagram and personality and human behavior in general, it requires unpacking the soup of attachments and how that contrasts with the Hexad types 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. So we're getting into it today, and I hope y'all like the last podcast with the three of them, because I'm quitting, and this one should be a two-parter, and then next week is just, or maybe part two, and then after that, there's a call with just David and Alexandra, which is the final culmination of the podcast lineup of just the two of them from now on.
And wait till you hear that because it is the most confusing and befuddled podcast ever.
Oh man, I'm
Two
It'd
nines.
be amazing.
Two nines that sort of like never hit a fucking punchline ever. You know what I mean? It's just like, so where does this actually lead, and where were we going? I keep, a lot of that.
Looking forward to it.
Oh,
Are we
what?
going to play the questions?
Yes. Let me do that now.
Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you. There was an episode where David was very open and wonderful and forthcoming, sort of about his process and just shit that's been happening in his life and whatever, how he shows up for things. And it was awesome to hear, and Emeka as well. Both of you have had sessions where you've really, I guess everybody has, but recently, the the episode with Dave, and then with Emeka. Super touching, super vulnerable, super awesome. And I know you guys had to cut out some of it because some stuff went, pretty deep. But yeah, just awesome. You guys are great. I especially like the change from like the snarkiness. Sometimes I'm like, oh, what the fuck? I could do without it. But it is nice to have sort of like a lighter view. But it was really nice contrast to like some of the snarkiness that that's in most of the episodes. Anyway, yeah, thanks. Oh, if there's anything you can do on 6, that'd be great. I'd love to listen. Thanks.
Not sure what that means.
Increase the snark.
Yeah.
More snarkiness.
Snark
got it.
levels.
Activate.
Well, cool. Thank you for listening to us
Yeah, thanks.
and tolerating our tone.
So this second one is a question about I think they're referencing the soul sex episodes where we were talking about being social blind and versus sexual first versus sexual last. And I think the question, well, I'll just play it.
Hi, Alexandra and BAT crew. Thank you to Alexandra for being such an articulate keynote on this super insightful episode. What was particularly helpful, at least for me, was how specific all of you were able to be on this episode with the presence of multiple attachment types and multiple hexad types. Most of the time, we read explanations that say this type is more XYZ than that type, and it's hard to know what that actually means. Alexandra and Nancy, the examples that you two gave blew my mind. I had the same type of out loud response of shock that Emeka and John had. The question that I have for all of you is, could you maybe delve a bit more into what it is like to be blind in a particular instinct? Alexandra made some great comments referencing discussions outside the podcast, and it would be awesome if we could hear more about that on the podcast. And second, or relatedly, more specifically, do you think that blindness in any particular instinct might look different if someone is an attachment type versus on the hexad? So for context, this came up because my experience in relationships was much more in line with what Emeka and John were saying about both being social blind, and not what Nancy and Alexandra were saying about being sexual blind. And yet, according to the collage and other things, I SPSO, which I thought made sense. But the discussion about being social blind, and then Nancy and Alexandra being shocked by John and Emeka's point, prompted this kind of question of whether being blind in any particular instinct might actually look different on the hexad and on the triangle. So being social blind when you're on the hexad versus social blind as an attachment type, or sexual blind on the hexad versus on the triangle, might those be different? Thank you for any thoughts you guys have, and just in general.
All right. So I thought that was a perfect question to lead into this topic, because I'm realizing that a lot of the stuff that I thought was just me being social blind, that a bigger deal, a bigger contrast was the hexad versus attachment. So someone, if you are a hexad type and you listen to this podcast, you're going to, regardless of whether you're social blind or not, you're going to relate heavily to what John and I are saying. And what I've realized, that even types who are attachment types who are social blind are still probably going to relate more to what Nancy and Alexandra were saying. This is a bigger deal to me, at least as from where I'm at currently. This orientation of attachment versus hexad is a bigger deal than the instinctual side.
I think it is important to do both, to unpack both the attachment types that do have social in their stacking and the attachment types that don't. And like Alexandra and I tried to peel apart some of that, since that's the case with she and I, that's part of the contrast. And so what is attachment look like without the social instinct? And I don't even necessarily have of course, a direction to go there, but it's like, for me, it's partly, well, what I was saying to her in our call last night was, it brings my whole history and all my strange history and so forth into how I do specifically attachment, which is to say that I kind of assume an underlying potential familial connection with kind of a lot of people in an easy way, but it's quasi sexual, or it has a sexuality and sensuality to it. So it's, in some sense, it's not socially appropriate,
Hmm.
right? And that's why, like, you guys have seen me in the chats over the years and just all over the internet or whatever. I'm constantly spooling out, spilling like sexual stuff. And
Mhm.
that's actually, now I'm starting to see that's me in a way doing attachment, because
Yes.
I'm sort of somewhat non-specific. I'm just trying to grab and it's really socially dumb. You know what I mean? But but I'm kind of pulling in people with all of that. So anyway, that's just one iteration of social last attachment.
We talked about it on the last one out, but David, you're really attachable. I don't know if you got to that part, John.
Yeah.
But just in terms of just the writing style.
Oh wait,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like he's really attachable,
Yeah.
even though he's cryptic. People are pulled in because he's sort of indiscriminately spilling his own, I don't know, like, hey, come play with me in my little cave pool, sex pool, you know. But anyway, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. So all right, I'm trying to unpack, David, what you just said. Like
Mm.
because there's something there is, like I said earlier, like the attachment thing. It's not, there's something that doesn't quite land in me,
Hmm.
and so like, all right, so you're saying that that your attachment stuff is spilling out through the lens of your instinctual stack, and so uh like, because we're trying to piece out what's attachment versus social instinct, and
Mhm.
that you will kind of like leak or spill or put out some sexual energy, but that it's attachment through the lens of sexual energy rather than social energy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's, a wide net. You know what I mean? It's not specific. And I sort of, like, here's one aspect of part of what I'm saying is, to me, attachment is quasi libidinal. Like, okay, if attachment types are the, let's say, the familial type, that's like the family of humanity, right? Well, we come from our parents' genitalia. So it's it's Freudian, right? I mean, that is the whole Freudian thing of, the Electra and Oedipal complex, is that we're sort of, as attachment types, we're somewhat pulled back to that genitalia event, if you will, that is our what's the word, conception, or something like that. And so, to me, there is this well, it's like a sexual webbing is part of what attachment is.
Yeah, from my point of view, it feels like just watching and observing you, David, it feels like you act like you already know people, or they should already know
Yes.
you. Like, like there's a private me, like in terms of how much my friends, and even, I mean, people have an impression of me on this podcast because I'm with my friends. But if they were to meet me, they would probably have a very different experience. Me that's not walled off versus me that's amongst friends and comfortable, it's very different. So when I post online or in forums, there's definitely a much more guarded impression of me. Like, there's like, don't fucking touch me. Whereas
Yeah.
David just feels like he's already friends with everybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. And people react to David like they're like old friends that like David offended or something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
he's very attachable, and I found this interesting
That's
because
so funny.
I talked to, because that's what I realized. What's happening is, like, why do I piss people off? I'm not attachable. Like, the
Yeah.
fact that you're saying the fact that in a Hexad types are saying this is where I'm at, this is me, and it's specific, is saying that you're not open to doing this sort of indiscriminate attaching to everyone, which is like kind of
Yeah.
elitist, arrogant, selfish,
right.
all these other things. So I was like, oh shit, this is like a completely different universe.
God, I mean, I don't know, not to turn on myself, but I'm gonna turn on myself. Like this, so the sense of like complete disconnection from like life in my own body and like everybody else that I feel all the time, that I take to like, it's like I just took it to be normal, so I don't really think about it. Like I just feel like I was born on the wrong level of reality, like all the time. And so this stuff just like it's like people don't. I think people all feel that way too. Maybe this is my attachment, and
They
confusing
definitely
again.
don't.
But I think it's buried or something, or maybe they don't. I don't know.
Like,
But I just
like
like
David feels the opposite. That's what his activities feel like to me. Like he
he's
feels
lying.
he
I'm kidding.
feels like we're all in the same fucking soup together. That's the only thing that fucking makes sense to me. Like I have hard boundaries. Like you got to work to get to me. And David's like, yes, come in, all of you.
I mean, I do have like my emotional center, like you could say like heart stuff. So like I feel heart connected to y'all. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I don't like feel like. But even still, I'm like y'all are super different from me, and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
that's just how like there's like no there's like a I don't know it's I don't know how to distinguish that.
As Hexad types, we expect to relate to people based on their individuality. Like you're
Yeah.
you, I like you. I don't. We don't have to overlap. I just appreciate whatever the fuck you are. And I realize that attachment types in like romantically can just. I've watched some shows where it's like, oh, you like to go look at open houses during the day? Cool, let's date. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like we have one thing in common, one or two things in common. Oh, we grew up in the same town. Oh, let's get married. You know, like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
God.
that is not.
Wow.
I don't understand that.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, one thing that comes up a lot in Alexander and I's relationship is like I have a lot of wounds around feeling unwanted and unattractive. And one of her things is she says, "Well, it's not that you're unattractive; it's that you're so, she says specific, which weird or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you're a very specific flavor or note or something, and not everybody responds to that, and it's there's nothing to attach to.
Yes.
And so like that's something I've like
Mhm.
started to kind of try to understand and consider. But man, the sense of just like being in the wrong like animal kingdom or something, like in the
Mhm.
wrong whatever, just like, oh, there's nothing for me here.
Yep.
And everything people are doing is wrong. Everything people
Yep.
are doing is inherently
And when you
uh,
say wrong, you don't mean morally wrong, of course. What do you mean?
there's definitely there's a little bit of, I guess, no, not really, there's a wrongness. I mean, I have a line to one, and
Right.
sometimes it comes out that way, like
Sure.
but there's just a sense of like it's not real, it doesn't mean anything, it's completely artificial, it's um arbitrary, it's lacking depth, it's lacking significance, it's lacking
Mhm.
beauty, it's lacking uh
Right.
like it's like there's an assumption, part of, I think, the fourth thing is like there's a real self somewhere, there's an ideal, like an inner world, and like this level of reality is completely unrelated, out of sync, and like an aberration on the real world.
Mhm.
And feeling like, one of the reasons love Egypt is like I think that Egypt was an attempt to, at some parts of Egypt's history, was an attempt to bridge that gap, and it's the only thing that ever got anywhere close at some point. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But everything else is like this, like complete, like I've described being a four, being like the oil, the awful thing that happened a long time ago. Like it's not coming. The apocalypse already happened, and this is what apocalypse looks like.
So part of that does, like, I get that a little bit, but my reaction to it is I don't think attachment types think that these attachments we're making based off of a few things we have in common are the best attachments we could have. But it's
Hmm.
something to bide us over until we get that good of attachment.
Oh.
Yeah, that's important.
Good
Yeah, so
fucking
it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, I have these people that I'm like, yeah, we're cool, we're chill, but like I have tiers of friends,
Yeah.
Like I have my best friends, and then I have my second best friends, and then I have my third, and then I have my fourth, because it's like not everyone, I'm not always there with everyone. That's fine.
So that I think that's a great point, because I think one thing I've seen some attachment types suffer from. I think we all do this, but I've seen more explicitly in attachment types is this. I have this sense, this dream of the real thing that comes from like my inner eye, but then like the yeses and nos or whatever, what was being used to describe that is like that gets covered over by the familial overlay. So there's this sense of, okay, this is not what I mean, that's what sloth kind of is. It's like, this is not this is not what I really want. This is what I can settle for.
Yeah.
And then it gets this like the whole web of life and choices and things get sort of entangled and enmeshed in the thing I don't really want, but it feels like the best I can get for now.
Hmm.
And it then after a certain amount of time or a certain whatever choices and whatever enmeshment in that circumstance, situation, or person or people, the ability to leave the substitute attachment for the real thing becomes next to impossible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so then it becomes like this like web of life of like regret and mistakes and not being true to oneself or something like that, various things with the different individual, but it really compounds this sense of like living the false life.
Mm.
Hmm. So I think this is part of why attachment types have such a hard time with hexad types, because to us it does feel like to move forward in life you have to settle. Like you're never truly going to get
Right.
what you want, and like that's just
Right.
obvious. Like the world is out to get you. You're never going to get what you want. So to watch hexad types like actively go after what they want and cause chaos around them, or you know do things that like aren't really socially acceptable to get to that thing that they want, is like, how dare you? Because
Mm.
I didn't, and no one asked me to settle, right? It's my own fault, okay?
Oh,
But
man.
we're all projecting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like it's, I understand we're all projecting, but it feels like you're doing something that I'm not allowed to do.
Oh,
And
wow.
so therefore
Wow.
you shouldn't be allowed to do.
Mhm.
So that's why the
God.
soul sex episodes were really such a huge hit.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
that's exactly it. Yeah.
God. Yeah, that's interesting.
Because we were basically saying, don't settle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And it's like, but I'm not allowed to not settle.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, the part that's hitting me is that attachment types are assuming that we should have this connection and we can start with just some basic bullshit that like we like the same color or whatever. It's not a real attachment, but we can start there. And John's, saying that types start there, and then that becomes what they've settled
It.
for.
Yeah.
It becomes it. And the thing that kept coming up, or I kept hearing, is the sense of feeling like if they were to leave, they would be abandoning the situation, and how that shows up for all the attachment types, including 3, which you wouldn't. It's easy to see attachment in 6 and 9, but to see that play out in 3 from the point of view of I started this, and if I quit it, then I'm a failure. I don't want that.
Mhm.
And just to see in the ways that you started out something that you were ambivalent about. You were on the fence. You
Mm,
he's like,
yeah.
this is something that you just said, this is good for now. We might get to a real connection later, or I might leave it later. It becomes a thing. And now you can't leave because of the responsibility that you feel
Yeah.
for, in the sense that if you did leave it, you would abandon it. And it really, I've had a really hard time coming to terms with that being basically how everyone is operating. Like it
God,
really
yeah.
bothers me on a very deep level.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
That's why everyone's so angry all the time.
And stressed out.
Hmm.
So yeah, it makes sense that, telling attachment types, go for your dreams and don't settle for relationships that are unfulfilling is like hitting the fucking spot, the pain spot.
But it's
Super.
also why those are on all the stupid motivational posters, those exact messages, because it's sort of not something that you're attuned to doing, or that you're not just automatically doing.
Right.
You're not following your own vision.
You don't have to tell a 7 to go do that, or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of the criticisms I've always gotten is that like I'm I'm so like just completely stubbornly wedded to my inner sense of how things are or should be,
Mhm.
or whatever, and like just completely inflexible.
Even Alexandra says that.
Even
You
yep, yes,
need
that's
to
true.
stretch more.
But in contrast, it just also makes me understand Hexad more. It's that, we talk about, or people talk about, or revere 4 and 5 is so specific and so deep and all that stuff. But it's like all the Hexads have a specificity.
Mhm.
For
Like
sure.
they have their location, and a 2 knows what you need, and they're just going immediately.
Even if you don't,
Even if
they
you
know
don't,
it.
they just know.
Yes. Yes.
Like they just,
Yeah.
all the Hexad types they know where they're at. They know what they want.
So yeah, like I mean, part of the suffering of and problem of Hexad is having too certain a view of what's real
Mm,
that either is not it may not be real, or it could be real, but like you've got such a specific flavor, version, vision, picture of it, that because of the lack of adaptability, you can never get what you want in a certain way.
yes, yeah.
And yeah, like not being able to meet either other people or reality on a certain level,
Yes.
because you have your inner vision of what you want or wanted. And so I think that there's a lot of heartbreak. And I mean, I don't think for a lot of Hexad types it even gets to heartbreak. I think that there's a lot of just, this is it, pushing,
Mhm.
pushing the one button, and then ending up completely like having a reality distortion field, or yeah, eventually maybe you break down into heartbreak because whatever was there was not, doesn't seem real or possible, like yeah.
Mhm.
And our reaction to that as attachment types is, well, we already know we're going to go into heartbreak, so we're just going to bypass that and pretend we're not alive at all.
Well, that's one thing that attachment is uh I don't know, cessation of the pain
Yeah.
of that, because you've got a bunch of attachments.
Exactly. It'll be okay.
And so you've got quote unquote support for the heartbreak.
It's fine.
Wow.
No, there's no heartbreak.
And commonality.
Yeah, exactly. There's no heartbreak.
No.
So this puts into perspective what I was saying about realizing, I'm just having these unsatisfying relationships that aren't going anywhere because I'm hooking up with people. And maybe the attachment perspective would be like, well, at least you're hooking up and you're having sexual relationships. Instead of just like being alone and holding out for the right one, you could just continue having less than ideal relationships and be with someone. And I recognize that there is some value in that. Like you
Mhm.
could just be in a relationship that's not the best, but you're still not alone. I guess the attachment types are overvaluing that sense of, innate connection
Attachment.
that, attachment. Like what's another word? But yeah, it's just overvaluing that. Like I'm gonna stick with this because it's better to be supported, to be with someone, than to go put myself out there for the ideal that will probably never happen.
So that brings up for me, so what is the with the Hexad type, you're talking there about, perhaps not being alone being better. So you've got a a sense of aloneness is not a good thing. So what's the difference between Hexad not wanting to be alone and attachment?
Well, I think for me at least, I felt that I could be with someone and feel completely alone, because it was like
Mhm.
not being
That's
alone.
interesting.
Yeah, because it's like when you realize how, because when you get into a relationship, you have an ideal. I think this is what it is, and as an 8, I'm trying to make it what I think it is. And at some point that breaks, and I realize it's never going to be what I think it is. It's actually a complete, mismatch. And at that point, I know that um, I'm alone. Like, that I might as well be alone. That's why I was okay with being alone, because I've been in these relationships that weren't working. I'm not doing the attachment thing of I'm just going to make this work. I might as well be by myself. In some ways, that those attachments were worse than being alone, because it was adding stress or negativity or whatever into my
Right.
life. And so being with someone like the ideal is so clear that in some ways being with the wrong influence or whatever feels like an affront or like a, I have to give up myself basically to be with someone, and that feels worse than being alone.
So I
Yeah.
guess I'm getting at, what's the dividing line, let's say, between, this whole attachment thing that we're talking about and the thing that actually is universal as well to Hexad types of uh, just wanting human connection.
So
Where do those divide off? And
so yeah, so as a hexad type that has been in relationships too long, um, what was going on for me was um there was both wanting to not be alone and to seeing potential for what I wanted in somebody, and thinking there was a process of having to get there that I had to go through, but also
Mm,
of rejecting what I thought like was out there, like just the rest of everything. I was like the rest of all people, the rest of everybody's attitudes towards relationships, love, and sexuality. I thought everybody was unserious. Like I'm very, like, very serious about my relationships. And I think most people see themselves that way. My judgment is not as serious as me in a certain way. And so there's this like complete, like everybody is trash garbage in terms of like from the point of view of what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
And so staying separate, and like I've got my thing that's still separate in one sense. Um, but it's kind of like this is there I would say maybe what's different though, there's very little self-adapting.
Yeah.
There's very little sense of changing myself. And there's very little sense of not recognizing the aloneness. Like I'm still fucking alone. And I don't know if attachment types somehow talk themselves into that they're not alone. I don't know how that works, but I don't know. Maybe because you guys
mm.
know me pretty well. I don't know if that pings anything for y'all in making those distinctions.
I've said this privately to John, but one thing that my current relationship is bringing up for me is it's helping me see the mechanics of my personality in the ways that I'm severing myself from my personality, severing me from my experience. And so, like, I'm experiencing something good. This relationship is amazing, but there are moments where it's almost like I'm watching a person be in this relationship who's me. Like it doesn't feel like it's happening to me. So I'm, the eighth style of dissociating from my
Mhm.
experience. And so it's hard to, like you don't want to be alone, but the sense of disconnect, I don't think ever fully goes away, if that makes sense.
Part of what has been, maybe you could say, like the drama on my end in Alexander and I's relationship is that I feel this sense of what I've been looking for, or like possibility of total merging. And then there are little things that come up that I'm like, oh no,
It's a deal
that's
breaker.
not even, no, not a deal, but like that's like a wound to the vision of what I
Mm.
have. That's
Mhm.
almost like like struggling to come to terms with this feature or that feature or this thing. And if like, I mean, even just the sense that like I've lived this long without her is like
Mhm.
there's a lot
Mhm.
of grief of like how much of my life was wasted, uh, s-
Mm.
because I wasn't with her, and coming to terms with that. And it's like, oh, but you should be grateful. I'm like, yeah, I am, blah blah blah. But there's like there is this other kind of thing, and
Mhm.
I know part of it's my frustration, attachment to being frustrated, I guess. But that's a real thing going on there. Does this make sense?
Yeah, me doing a rejection thing, what I grapple with is, like I'll have sudden flashes where it's like it doesn't feel like the person who loves me actually can love me or is
Mm.
loving me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I
Like
have. Yeah, some of that too.
it,
Yeah.
it's weird to me that it still happens because I have every cognitive or physical evidence to the contrary. Maybe it'll go away eventually, but there's always this feeling sometimes where I'm like, how is this happening? Like how there's like I'm gonna wake up one day and realize like it's all been a sham. Like
Yeah.
it's all like I don't know why, but I'm in a relationship, but there's something in me that is not believing that the deep connection that I have is actually real, or as real as it is. So
Yeah.
it's I wonder if that's a thing for all Hexad types. I don't know. Maybe it's just because we're, you know, in like 4, 5, 8, whatever. But it's something that I've been really like watching this happen has been like a first for me. Watching how much I am not even being able to saturate in the connection.
Yeah, I think
Interesting.
it's
Go ahead.
like the sense of me can further and further and further like remove itself. Like it can
Yeah.
further not in like a nine-ish sort of dissipating way, but like I go from Saturn to Neptune to Pluto in terms of distance from like
Yeah.
from anything real.
I'm just thinking about myself relative to the issue of being alone, because like I've kind of designed my life around being alone, and it's interesting, in the context of this conversation, you know, uh, it's I sort of have the sense, I've maybe said this in a previous pod before, but it's kind of what we were talking about earlier as well, where I have the sense that I can plug in a bunch of different places,
Yeah.
and have connection. And so that gives me the freedom to be absolutely alone and spend a ton of alone time.
See, that's
And
different.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I see that with David because it's like you are so attachable. It's almost like I live in, you guys have been here. I live in Bucktown, Chicago, and it's middle of everything. And living here makes me feel not lonely because I'm surrounded by action. I can go, there's like a gazillion bars within walking distance, which means I don't go to any bars. See what I mean?
Yeah. I relate. Same with Bushwick. Yeah.
It's like I'm around the action. It's right there. I can walk into a bar in 5 minutes, which means I don't feel any need to do that. Whereas if I lived in the suburbs, I'd be here every weekend. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I see that with you, David, where you're an attachment type and you feel like you can just plug into anyone at any point. You can get into a relationship if you want. And the opposite's true for me. I feel like it would be I can have disconnected momentary connections with people because people aren't attaching to me. And so the prospect of a real connection seems so miraculous. It
Yes.
seems so miraculous because it feels like a once in a decade, once in a lifetime thing that someone somehow could find their way into attaching to me, as specific as I am. Feels I've had to realize that that's what's happening. I couldn't figure out what the fuck. I'm not giving away any. I'm not giving people any attachable points to just plug into, and I'm not doing the attachment game. So,
And as far as romantic partners, for me, because of that sexual middle thing, and it's really, I don't have the same reflexive sort of reverence for that space. Like that's not my religion,
yeah,
right? Like with you guys, it's actually your fucking religion,
Totally.
right? And so yeah, and for me, and again, it's attachment combined with sexual middle. It's just like there's all these possibilities of those kinds of connections. And it's also, as a 9, I'm not, honoring myself in that certain way of like really mm, wanting to confront myself through a partner in that, kind of intense way of a serious connection has, you know what I mean? Because then that would individuate me and solidify me. I mean, that's part of what's going on right now with me and Sahara. It's been pretty intense because of all of that. It feels like a whole bunch of stuff is shifting around underneath for me. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty big stuff. And and it's having me take myself more seriously.
Yes.
Which is a whole new thing. And of course, that's really threatening to the whole 9 type structure.
Yeah.
Right. Being loved is like one of the scariest experiences because it means that I'm actually really deeply connecting with you, and it's easy for me to be in something where, I'm not really here. Maybe I'm getting my needs met, but to have that sort of directed energy that someone really loves you and values you deeply is like, oh man, my separation, severing shit starts coming up, and it's like I'm watching myself living this life where I'm being loved. Is like, this is really you. This is happening right now.
Well, you know,
I just imagined you eating popcorn, just watching yourself like, huh, that's crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So David, like I know that we are not like on level of romantic relationship or something, but you know, like we've got a thing here, you know, and
Yeah,
so like
for sure.
you mattering to us, like how does that I don't know, like how does that work? You know what I mean?
Since
us
he's
about
not
your
gonna
social.
fuck us, where is it?
So how does that work for me in what sense?
In the friendship sense, like
How
us,
do you have friends?
yeah, like you matter really a lot to us. So does that impact you in a similar way that the romantic stuff does, or maybe because it's social, it doesn't at all?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, you guys are very specifically mattering to me, each of you, and it's very specifically, you know, textured and flavored and colored. You know what I mean? You're articulated individuals, but I'm constantly assuming it's somewhat similar to maybe some stuff Nancy said, where I'm pretty constantly assuming that you guys are forgetting about me, or that you could take me. Oh yeah, totally. Oh yeah.
That's why I
No,
have to call you every 2 weeks.
yeah,
Oh,
no, I mean,
man.
and that's part of the nine, an element in the whole nine ghosting people thing is
Mhm.
that you kind of think well, I'm really not that big of an entity in that person's world anyway.
Right.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't really matter that much, so
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, it's a constant profound, you know, devaluation of just my presence and existence. I just assume it's, you know, not that big a deal. I mean, if I can think about it intellectually, you know, all the stuff we've shared and the ideas and my ideas having an influence on you guys and all that kind of stuff. Well, it's partly the attachment thing of an element there is that I just channeled stuff that was part of the universe. So it's not me.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
all right.
God, interesting.
Self-deleting constantly.
Self-deleting constantly. Yeah.
So I mean, for one hand, so speaking just in response to you, David, like you know, you're a fucking huge influence on me.
Yep.
You know, and a big part of my like inner psychic world or whatever. And then, but yeah, there's a similar frustration, you know, and really frustration with me and Alexandra, where there's always this anger and feeling of like I felt like I was always looking for you.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
I know, like she says she's been always looking for me, and like there's all this kind of crazy shit, like going back way back to her, like of like this sense of
Mhm.
each other. And I'm like,
Mm.
I get all fucking mad at the way that she kind of like lost sight of that in some points.
Or like it couldn't be me, she's saying, or that you were looking for, or something like
Yeah,
that.
well, yeah, it's like yeah, there's a sense of like this is what I always wanted, but and this is like I had this archetype of this kind of person who was more
Mhm.
serious than me. Like I was into the Phantom of the Opera, into vampires, like
Mhm.
all this. Like I was looking for somebody who was like so many qualities that are me.
Mhm.
And but it was like but that's not what can happen. That's not what's real. And so I'm gonna date fucking button up losers, you know. And and I mean, for me, like, I mean, I have my own thing where I like saw, okay, maybe this person can meet me on this level, but then I accept that, okay, there's a certain level we can get to, and then I'm alone,
Yeah.
and I can play out frustration bullshit or whatever. And so now with Alexandra, I mean, the sense of like intendedness is like so fucking crazy and clear for me. And it's just like I'll have all these like things about jealousy and stuff like this that I know are not rational, but they're based on this conviction that we were supposed to be together. And I'm having a really hard time releasing and letting go some of those feelings because the sense that we were supposed to be together is like so strong.
Mhm.
And then, like, you should have known because I knew on some level, and I was like, I do think I was making choices for my soulmate, like, since I was a little kid.
Hmm.
You know, like, I really, again, it's a whole conversation or whatever. But anyway, it's just like this thing of like, baby, you knew this too. You know? And the thing is, we always come to, we both knew the same thing, and on many different levels, different things that we all knew, both knew, but
But
we had
but
different ways
but
of handling it.
but does it fade out for her? Is that part of your complaint, so to speak, that she's deleting herself sometimes in that thing you're talking about?
It's like she will have the same vision. She had the same vision, but settling for something else,
Yeah.
or turning
Okay.
her back on it, or being like, that's not what, like, I'm not gonna live as if I'm preparing for that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but does she accept the position of and hold the position, so to speak, of being the one that was and has been or and is your specific target?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
although like I love my partner a lot, and I do think like we're a great fit and all that kind of stuff, I've never really believed in like the one.
Mhm.
Like I don't
Mhm.
buy into that
Hmm.
at all. Because because
Do
I
you
just
now?
no,
Okay.
because I mean I just don't
So
think.
Brian can fuck off.
No, no, no. You know that's not what I mean. But it's just it's more of a like, yeah, like this is definitely, I think, as good as it gets, all that great stuff, but it's like I don't think I'm so important or he's so important that we would have one person in the world.
Mm.
Does that make
That's a
sense?
yeah, that does make sense.
Mm.
I'm wondering if that's part of maybe what would have been so triggering for the conversation about a soul connection, because it is kind of zeroing in, which is a hexad perspective.
Yeah.
Like that there would be one person out there, even if it was just a couple. There's still something, because I believe maybe it's not just one person, but
Right. Yeah. I mean,
you have several.
yeah, I'd be open to the like, okay, well, you have a couple. You have
Because I mean,
two people.
I feel like, me, David, and John, this whole group, that we were supposed to meet. Like,
Yeah.
we're so aligned and so
Sure.
specific, that what are the chances that these people, us, would be on a planet alive at the same time, interested in the same thing at this, like, there's no way that this was just by chance. And so I think of the possibility that, yeah, you are linked to certain souls in your lifetime, but that's kind of like having a very specific vision. And
Hmm.
I think that part of the attachment versus hexat thing is attachment types seeing the whole soup, the whole thing, and seeing how you can sort of fit in with so many different areas and so many different people, that the idea of a soulmate seems extremely idealistic.
Hmm.
I'm not to say that the attachment types some don't believe that, and there's definitely some that do, but it seems like one of those things that is pushed on attachment types as an inspirational thing to hold on to, that they kind of like, like that's not really realistic.
Right. Like,
And they're also often attachment types are making sort of halfway connections into, or holding out hope that
Mhm.
it's possibly
Right.
the soulmate.
Yeah.
And it really never was.
right.
Whoever they're with. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's Alexander and I were talking about the soul mate idea, and the idea is like the soul's mating.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
like and I don't think everybody has a soulmate, and I don't think that need to, or think multiple or whatever. Like there's some configurations are supposed to happen or whatever. But yeah, at least since I was like, before I had the language and concepts for it, I was like, I remember being like, this is my fucking one coming out, but like on the playground there was kissy girls, and being like, you shouldn't be kissing so many boys. That's special.
Mm-hmm.
That's reserved. That's special. That's for
Yep.
special stuff.
Oh
I mean,
man.
I was in fucking kindergarten or whatever. Sexual type religion.
Yep. There
You're
it
like,
is.
whoa, 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 ladies, keep it
Yeah.
in your pants.
Really? Yeah. I was like, no, that, like, I remember being like, that needs to be something special.
That's cute.
Yeah, there's still stuff to explore, but I think this is probably a good
Mhm.
place to stop.
Yeah.
And to see people's responses to this, which might, because there's been some really good stuff that's been coming out from Hexad types and attachment types sort of reacting that I've just been really eye opening. So I want to hear what people have to say, and we can do this again. And I want to I want to see what comes up for David and Alexander when I fucking edit that shit. Jesus.
Good luck.
2
Good
hours
luck.
later.
Good luck on untangling some soup.
Yeah, it's so funny
Oh
because
God.
Alexandra came out. She recorded in her closet because I guess you couldn't hear outside or whatever. And she comes out and like I could see in her face like in the 9 zone. Like she was like, I hope Emeka has some patience.
I'll
Yeah.
always make it work. It's just like
Yeah, no, I think it'll be good. It's funny.
Yeah, picks up some steam towards the end, but it's still. I have my doubts.
Great.
I mean, that's. I mean, we've had some calls like that where we came in, we didn't know what the fuck we were talking about when we ended up somewhere, and
Yeah.
I just realizing doing this podcast is I have some innate talent to just look at some random shit on the table and find the through line.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
almost
no,
Yeah, you
can do
really
that.
do. You really do. I would not be
No,
able to do what
that-
you do.
That'll work.
So like
That'd be great.
there's always a through line, and it's just cut out the rest of the shit, and then everyone listens to it and they're like, oh, that was great.
Like it all just happened, just like that.
Yeah. People don't have any fucking clue. Like if we did
The amount of bullshit.
like a live podcast, like a video podcast. Ugh, I don't
Oh
know,
Yeah.
my
man.
god, yeah.
It would be detrimental to people's mental health.
Yeah, totally.
All right, but I gotta go. I gotta take a quiz.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we should do another part 2 of this. I think there's still a lot more stuff to talk about that we didn't even get to.
All right, I gotta go, y'all.
All right.
Okay,
Later.
bye. Bye.